spokeswoman, Tamara Alrifai, who joins us now from the Jordanian capital, Amman. Ms. Rifai, thank you for joining us. Obviously, a very sort of quick-moving situation that we're seeing here. We're seeing many Gazans moving north of the Netzerim corridor towards northern Gaza, most probably as they assume to find that their homes have been destroyed and they will be living in temporary shelter. Can you just give us an idea of what sort of scenario is available for them in terms of both shelter and aid?
Most of the people in Gaza who have gathered over the last couple of days, we're talking about tens of thousands of people who have gathered on Rashid Street, Salah ad-Din Street, and Beach Road. We're trying to go back home, or what is left of home, indeed, in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. But UN data indicates that up to 90% of all housing units in Gaza, 90% of all housing units have been destroyed or damaged. So while I am watching the footage that Al Jazeera is showing and listening to how joyful and happy and relieved people are at the anticipation of going back home, the scale and the scope of the destruction is unforeseen. The risks of unexploded devices, particularly for children, are very high. And mostly the access to food or to daily comfort is almost inexistent, except for, thankfully, over the last now 8 days of a ceasefire, except for the aid that is coming into Gaza as part of the ceasefire. And it's worth highlighting that 60% of the food that has come into Gaza since the ceasefire started has come in with UNRWA, the largest UN and humanitarian agency.
Can I just jump in there, Ms. Rifai, because UNRWA is banned by the Israeli authorities, so you're surely having to work with partner agencies as well. How does that work?
We've worked with partner agencies since the beginning of this conflict. The way it works is that UNRWA, being the largest humanitarian agency, has the largest number of trucks, has the warehouses, has the shelters that it has managed with, at most times, 1 million people inside them, up to 1 million people. And we mostly have the acceptance by the community in Gaza. So we've coordinated very closely, especially at times when our own humanitarian assistance, our food and other supplies were banned, were not coming in. We've coordinated very closely with other UN agencies, with international NGOs, and also with local community partners, so Palestinian groups, to make sure that the food that comes in is well distributed using our list of beneficiaries, storing it in our warehouses, and taking it around with our trucks. But beyond the food, our health centers and health clinics and health teams have not stopped. The polio vaccination that took place late last year was really driven by UNRWA, WHO, and UNICEF. All vaccination, all medical consultations, 16,000 medical consultations per day are done by UNRWA.
Ms. Rifai, just to bear with you just for 1 minute as we tell our viewers that on the left-hand side of the screen now, the Al Rashid Road is opening up for those... it's the Salah ad-Din Road, yes, it had the wrong strap up there, I think. The Salah ad-Din Road for traffic. The inner arterial road going up north is now opening up, so we'll see that influx of vehicles moving north as the hours progress. It's not just vehicles, it's horse-drawn carts, donkey carts, people on bicycles as well, as you can see, carrying most of their belongings, or what they can carry on those vehicles, to the northern part of the Strip via and crossing the Netzerim corridor, which, of course, they will be checked at. Can we also ask you then, really, you talked about the medical facilities. We know there are no medical facilities. Most of what is there has been destroyed, Ms. Alrifai. So in terms of what needs to be established in terms of a medical infrastructure, I presume we're talking mobile health clinics and mobile operating theatres, that sort of thing, perhaps?
Yes, it's a continuation of what we've already had. UNRWA has already deployed, since the beginning of this conflict, around 90 medical teams of different sizes onto the shelters, onto the areas near the shelters, again, to continue giving the 16,000 consultations per day, looking after pregnant and lactating women, and also administering vaccines whenever it was possible to reach the community. But can I come back for a second to the very heartening footage that I'm seeing and remind that most Gazans have been displaced throughout the war on average 6 times, but up to 19 times in 15 months, therefore losing loved ones and belonging every time they moved. And now it's so heartening to see them trying to go back to what they call home.
Of course, we are still in the middle of winter at the moment, and you talked about the polio vaccination programme, but there are other ailments that do emerge during these months, whether it be cold, flu, even COVID is still around. I mean, what sort of ailments are you hearing about, and what needs to be dealt with in the here and now?
We've heard about a lot of ailments having to do with lack of hygiene and congestion, especially in the shelters, but also having to do with low immunity due to malnutrition. So skin diseases were rampant, respiratory diseases as well, various kind of gastro diseases, especially amongst children. The number one priority is to put back in place a form of hygiene, and therefore access to clean drinking water is key, having running electricity, and so getting fuel into the Gaza Strip to enable the power plants to work is also key, and having a much larger access to medical services, to medicines, and to more complicated consultations and surgery. Therefore, rebuilding the hospitals is key for public health and for specialized care.
How easy has it been to negotiate the movement of such aid before the ceasefire and the relationship that UNRWA has with the Israelis to what we're seeing now and what you're telling us about the number of aid trucks that have been able to get into the Gaza Strip as a whole post-ceasefire?
It's been excruciating negotiating humanitarian aid into Gaza because aid has been politicized and weaponized, which should not happen. The access of people to basic food, water, and medical supplies should not be part of any negotiations. But here we are, a few days, 9 days into the ceasefire, with a massive surge, or so it's described. In reality, the deal calls for 600 trucks of aid per day. That is the bare minimum for people in Gaza to survive on. Prior to the war, so 15 months ago, before that, Gazans received 600 trucks per day, a mix of humanitarian and commercial goods that those who had access to cash could buy. And even then, Gaza was under a blockade, and most people lived under the poverty line. So while we all hailed the ceasefire and the surge in humanitarian assistance, Gazans need everything today, and in view of the destruction, it's going to be very difficult for people to rebuild their homes, access different parts of the Gaza Strip with the destroyed roads, but mostly gain back a sense of normality. UNRWA gives them a sense of normality. If we're able to take children back into some kind of learning and later into schools, if we're able to reopen our health centers, and that is now seriously threatened by the decision of the government of Israel to ban UNRWA operations in what the government of Israel calls territory under Israeli sovereignty.
There, we will have to leave it for the moment. Tamara Alrifai from UNRWA, of course, will come back to you as we get more developments of the aid operation into the north of the Gaza Strip. Thanks so much for joining us. And for you watching at home,